Rock and roll.
What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho. I am the one-armed madman, and with me today we've got Max Shippee. Max, pleasure to have
Woo!
you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
That's
Appreciate it.
it's a bitchin' cover you've got going on your book.
You like
Did you
that?
design it?
Yeah.
Did a publisher design it, or
You
you're
know what?
self-published, right?
I'm self-published, but I actually there's a great website called readsy.com, and they put authors with, there's a whole like marketplace, I guess, with like editors and cover designers and marketers and that sort of thing. And this I put a little call out for like anybody want to do a book cover, and a guy named Tim Byrne who lives in the UK. His stuff was really good, and he actually read the book and really liked it, and he's like, I'd love to do this. We're like, great. And it was one of the first compliments we got on the book, because it had only been me and my wife kind of reading through the book, as you do, and and he was the first person outside of family and my wife who actually read the book. And he said, you usually only read the first 20, 30 pages, but he's like, I couldn't stop it. I read right through the whole thing.
I was
So he's
just
like, so
gonna
I
say,
really,
like, that's cool of him to like read the whole book, because you would imagine that like somebody who's designing cover art doesn't really like
oh,
have the time to go through and read,
correct.
as many
Totally
books as,
understandable.
right?
Yeah.
I've always
Yeah. Yeah.
wondered about like people that like read audiobooks. Like, I wonder if they read it before they
Mm,
record reading it. You know what I mean? Because you
yeah.
kind of have to know what's going to happen. Like, unless you're just really good at your job and are able to kind of like
Right. Off the
figure
cuff,
out
do it.
as it goes, or maybe you like read a little bit and go, oh, I messed that up because of A, B, and C, and go back. But you
Yep.
would think like they probably have to read the entire book before they read the entire book.
Oh yeah, it's funny you say that, because I recorded my own audiobook
Oh,
because
really?
I didn't have the cash to do it. And this is a great story, actually. As I was telling people that I was writing a book, inevitably, like a lot of people were like, "You can do an audiobook," and for me, I hadn't even considered really doing it. But it was easy. 50% of people were asking about
Oh,
audiobook,
yeah.
and I totally get it. Like people, they're riding their motorcycles, they're doing
Yeah.
dishes, they're doing whatever, and it's just like, no, I can have it on and I can listen. That's kind of the way that people read books these days, which
Yep.
is, I totally think is reading. It's totally fine, right? And no judgment on that at all. But I realized that so many people were asking. I'm like, well, this is really important, and it actually pushed me to get it done, because a I'll try to truncate the story as much as possible, but we have a wonderful old friend of my wife and I who's known us. She did some art for us before we got married, and my wife has been great about sending her Christmas cards and things. And we haven't seen her since we got married, but she's watched our kids like grow up for 18 years. And in the latest Christmas card last year, um, she said, "Hey, we're publishing this book," and da da da. And we got an email back from her saying, like, "Oh my God, I'd love to read it, but I can't read that much anymore." She's in her 80s.
Yeah.
She's like, "I can't read, so let me know when the audiobook comes out." And that really kind of lit my fire to be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, we got to get this done." So when you do when you do your audiobook for Audible, I'm not a sound engineer, but there's like a million settings that you have to have right, and there's noise floors and ceilings and
Oh, I didn't know that.
cancellations, and you know what I mean, like all the bit rate and a bunch of other stuff that I'm like, what? But on YouTube, you can just, no one cares. You just post. So actually on YouTube, on my audiobook is actually on YouTube, and it's me just literally like holding the book and reading it, like my face just sitting there reading the book. And I got that done. And sorry, we'll put two stories in the middle here, but
Yeah.
like you were saying about actually reading the book out loud, I wrote the damn thing. And I still repeatedly had to be like, no, stop, go back. Okay, hit that again. Because number one, you get rolling, and then you listen to it, you're like, oh, that's way too fast. Like, no one, if people want to speed it up and go 1.25 times or 1.5 times, that's fine. But I got to start someplace where it makes sense. And then there's that weird thing where you're like, should I be giving the words more emphasis? Should I be making it emotional, or let the words speak for themselves? Like, there's always that little battle. But it took, I mean, the audiobook itself is about 9 hours, and it probably took actual recording time at least double that, maybe triple that, by the time you sit down and redo it. And then, recording time. Then on top of that, the editing time, which takes time as well.
Yeah.
But back to the story about our friend, is that I sent her the link because I want her to get it. And once again, she's in her 80s. Who knows,
Yeah.
when, much longer that's going to last. And it was the first most heartwarming thing that someone said about the book. She said she loved it. And she said, it's been so long since someone has read to her.
Oh,
And it
interesting.
just kind of broke my heart in a wonderful way. Kind of like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like someone who's aged, like no one's read to me since I was a child. It's just like, oh my God, that's amazing. So now I tell people, like, if you want to listen to the book, like, if you want to see me read it, go on YouTube, do the thing. I'll send you some links so you have it, and if you want to put it in the notes or whatever.
Yeah, for
But yeah, it was a very, very, like, you don't realize it wasn't even so much. I mean, she loved the book, but it wasn't even so much the book that she got to see me, And of course, that's a personal connection. Not everyone's going to have that connection, but it's very interesting when you put something out into the world, you get back stuff that you never anticipated. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, for sure. And like for me, like I think audiobooks are great because you don't have to concentrate as much on like the physical words in front of your face
Yeah,
and your mind is able to kind of world build and you're able to do that theater of the mind where you can kind of create the world
totally.
in your head and kind of visualize what's happening like
Yeah,
typically when I listen to a book like by the first, end of the first chapter or so, I've got an idea of like
yeah,
what I think the characters look like and what I think
totally,
the setting looks like. And I'm kind of
totally.
able to like generate that world within my mind. And I think that it adds an extra dimension that you don't get from like reading the physical book.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's
I'm
an
with you that way.
interesting, huh?
I'm with you that way. Like doing
Yeah,
yard work or doing something, you got something in your ear, like, yeah, you're raking the leaves, but you're in another world at the same time
for
because
sure.
the raking of the leaves doesn't take that much thought. It's just a thing you're doing. So your brain, the thinking part of your brain gets to do something while the physical part of your brain gets to do something. It's a really cool mixture, I think.
So I think it's interesting that I would imagine you're selling the physical copy of the book, but then
Yep.
since you've got the audio version on YouTube, I would imagine that's free.
Yes, that's
How
free.
did that decision go down?
You
Because
know,
you want like the overall, I would imagine like the overall feeling for like getting a book finished is you just really
mhm,
want people to read it. But
yeah,
then also it took a lot of your time and effort, so
of
you would
course.
like to get compensated for it. So I would
Sure.
imagine there must have been a difficult decision there. Like, do I give it away for free and just get people reading it? Or do I, you know, pay somebody to read it and
Yeah,
put it on Audible
totally.
and,
Right. It's funny you say that because I actually saw a post of, I forget the author's name. I should have it, but his books ended up being on Apple TV, the series Silo.
oh,
I
okay.
can't think. Wool, I think, is the first book. I think is the first book you read, and he had a great post. It was on Reddit or someplace else where he said books are one of the few things where literally the more you give away, the more you sell.
Mm,
Like they both work hand in hand. And he talked about when he was first selling his first book, he just like he gave as many copies as possible. He says it's a little counterintuitive. I can see if you're giving away cars like that, you know, you
yeah.
still have to go produce another car. But the good thing about books and now with digital books and the rest of it, like it costs nothing to forward a PDF to someone or,
Yeah.
the rest of it. And he said that's the thing. If people are talking about it, people turn around and start buying it. And even if people see it on YouTube and they hear the whole thing, well, now they want to go buy a copy because they want that on their shelf now.
Yeah.
It's an interesting kind of turn. And yeah, it took a second for me because you do, on the one hand, you want to offer your gifts to the world. And on the other hand, you want to be compensated. And like it took 2 years to write and the rest of it. And I also learned in the process that it's almost easier to sell two books than one because when you get to the end of the first one, you want to keep reading.
Yeah.
And like I have friends of mine who are like, oh yeah, I won't even start a series if it's not finished because I'm gonna blaze through it in 6 months. And if the guy's not done, I'm gonna be pissed at the
Yeah.
end,
No,
So
I totally
um
relate to that. Like
yeah.
I'm deep into this series on Audible called The Expeditionary Force. I think there's like 17 of them or
Oh
something
my
like that
God.
right now. And I blazed through all of them in a couple of months. And now
Yeah.
it's like they come out every, once or twice a year. And by that time,
Right.
you're kind of forget what happened in the
Yeah,
previous one.
totally. I mean, I get it too. Just writing my own book and now, starting the second one is just like, okay, wait, did I set myself up for this or did I wait a second? You have to
Yeah.
actually go back and do your own stuff. So it's yeah, I get that part of it, but I'm just trying to get the book out there as much as
Yeah.
possible.
You
That's
know,
the idea.
Andy Weir did almost the same thing. Like when he wrote The Martian, he
Hmm.
serialized it
Oh,
and
that's right.
on
That's right.
Substack for free,
Hmm.
essentially. Like I think it
Yeah.
was for free. Maybe he had some paying subscribers. I'm not
Right.
really sure,
Patreon kind of
but
thing or something. Yeah.
yeah. But I know that he serialized the book because there was so much technical analysis within the book
Uh,
that he needed help, and he didn't
hmm.
like have the money to hire somebody to like help him with all the technical analysis, essentially.
Right.
So he would give it away. He would write a chapter, then he would put it on Substack. Then subscribers would go through it and read it and go, "You need to change this and this and
Oh
this
my
and
God,
this."
how that's
And
wicked
like I
smart.
would
He just
imagine, like as he was writing the book, more and more people started going on because you've got an expert in one field that goes, "Hey,
right.
hey, my buddy would know a lot about this subject.
Totally.
Why don't I bring
Totally.
him in and give him a link to it? And then he can go through and give you." And then the guy decides, you know what, this is interesting. I'm going to start from the
Yeah.
beginning. And, it's a big cycle of,
What a great way to get like the super nerds and the super fans involved,
yeah,
you know, to be like, that's not accurate. It would be this way. And you're like, okay. And you make a change. And then, like, exactly like you said, some rocket science, there's this calling his, you know, plant specialist who knows about, possibilities on other planets of growing stuff. He's like, no, he says he's growing potatoes. That's wrong. You
yeah,
got to get on this. You know what I mean? That's super community effort. That sounds super, super fun.
yeah. I can imagine that it would be fun, especially like there's times when something cool that other people aren't like familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
A book,
Everyone's got
a
a deep dive in
movie, a
some weird
TV
thing.
show.
Yeah.
I was talking about an obscure TV show the other day to one of my buddies. It was called Devs.
Okay.
It was a short one season show on Hulu about a bunch of like weirdos that create this computer that tries to, you know, figure out if we're living in a world that's governed by determinism or free
Oh my
will. And
God.
it's just a crazy show. And it was like
Right.
I don't know how nobody knows about that show, and I can imagine
Right.
it's the same thing. Like there's books that I read on, Audible that have tons and tons of reviews. And then there's other books that I read that have very few reviews.
Right.
And it's like, man, like, why doesn't this book have any more reviews? And
Yeah.
I would imagine it's because Audible is very saturated right now, and it's probably
Yeah.
really hard to get. I've also, talked to a lot of other writers who say that like it takes 3 books to kind of like
Yeah.
break through that initial like lull of
Whatever
not
the
being able to
ceiling
sell
is
or
or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I can imagine that, if you look at it in the long game and you do have a series that you're writing, you can go, all right,
Hmm.
especially for the first book, I'm not going to make any money. Like
Right.
it's just going to be something that I'm going to give away to as many people as possible, get them interested in the story,
Right.
and hope that they start buying book 2 and 3.
And even so much that once I figured that out, that like, it's easier to sell a series than a single book, I was like, okay, well, I shouldn't be maybe quite yet dumping all my, set aside marketing money for the first book
Yeah.
when that's going to be way more effective if, like you said, if I have three. And now I can put it for all 3 books and that money's going to go a lot further. So it does take some some terrible patience to be like, I have a book. Okay, yeah, but I'm still hold on. I got to do another one and I got another one, and I can understand why some people will even try to write all 3 books first and then release them
Yeah,
like
for
literally all at the
sure.
same time so you have the thing, but that's just not
And depending
I
on the length of the book, like the book I'm
yeah.
listening to right now by I don't remember the guy's name.
Okay.
It's a
Okay.
famous sci-fi series, so Peter F.
Okay.
Hamilton. And
Okay.
the book's like 42 hours long.
Oh my god.
So I can't imagine like writing all 3 books within his trilogy
Oh
of
my,
this
how can you
series.
even keep that straight in your head?
I know. And like I do have issues with it because like it takes place in the future, so everybody has weird names, which is
Oh,
hard to like
right.
keep track of everybody's name when there's all
Right.
these like weird names, and then there's
Of
just
course.
tons of different storylines that
Like
are all
there's no guy
coming
named
together.
Jim,
And
really? There just can't
yeah,
be a guy named
and
Jim,
as soon
please.
as you think you've got it figured out, you're like, okay, I this is that guy, this is this lady. Like you
Right.
finally think you got it figured out. Then he introduces another new
Of
storyline. And it's
course.
like, come on,
Of
man.
course.
Like, can we just condense this into a
Like,
couple of different storylines so I can keep this shit straight?
right, right. It's way better to can you just hold that one and come back to it in 20 to 30 pages or
Yeah.
like we love that as audience and as readers is when you kind of drop a story and then it comes back as a surprise, like we're like there's a couple characters in my book that they're begging for their own stories. Like when they show up, you're like, "Oh, what?" And then of course they leave this story, but you're like, "Oh, they please let them come back because they're just such a fun character." Um and actually one of the who is becoming a main character. He didn't show up until like 2/3 of the way through the book. So the main character in my book is a young boy named Sam who's lives in the South. It's like 1910 or so. He's 12 years old. He's a young black boy, and he has essentially an adventure. And 2/3 of the way through the book, he basically finds a buddy. And when his buddy showed up, his name is main character is Sam, and this kid is named Stu. And when he showed up, it was just like, oh yes, yes, okay. And he's the perfect kind of mischief, like I'm a big Mark Twain fan, and he's the perfect Buck Finn, Tom Sawyer kind of character where he thinks he knows everything but doesn't, one of those kind of kids. Um, but he almost wants his own story. And even part of their adventure as they move away from the south to the north, like even that, there's a couple of characters there where you're like, wait, who is this? And she seems awesome. And why is she leaving? Wait, I want more of her. And that's I love stories like that where you're like, wait, the main character, yes, I totally get it, but I want to know more about that
Yeah.
person over there. And you get to then think in your head, like, oh, I want more of that person too. I just got to figure out how to get them back in here that makes sense so they can either stir the pot or save the day or, cause chaos or rescue someone or, that's appropriate because we love that as well.
Yeah. No, I read a book by a guy named Peter Watts. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the book right now, but
Okay.
it was an interesting freaking book. Like it
Hmm.
wasn't that exciting. Like there was a lot of heavy like technical stuff going on in it, and like one of the
Hmm.
characters was a vampire, and this is kind of
Hmm.
like a sci-fi space
Hmm.
story, and vampire and sci-fi, that's kind of strange. But the guy that wrote the book is like a biologist, so he wanted to go through and like add vampires and zombies into the story and have
Hmm.
like a legitimate reason like why these things would exist, and like his vampire character was very compelling, and
Oh,
you
sweet.
didn't get a ton of information on him, and you were kind of just like, I want to know more about this guy essentially. And
Hmm.
I saw an interview a while ago by the guy who directed District 9, that movie about
Oh,
aliens,
wow.
and
Yeah.
he had the same thought when he read the book. He was like, this guy is like deserving of his own movie, and
Yeah.
supposedly he bought the rights to the book just to make a movie about that guy. But this was years ago that I watched that interview,
Right.
and it
Right. Right.
hasn't happened yet. But
Yeah.
hopefully at some
District 9
point.
is a great movie. Love
Yeah,
that
it
movie.
was a really good movie. I remember
Yeah.
watching that movie, and I hadn't heard of it before, and I was like, I'll
Yeah.
give it a watch. And
Yeah.
by the end of it, it was like, wow, like that was
Yeah.
good. And a lot of
Yeah.
times when you have like an actor in it that you're not familiar with,
It's even
it
better, right?
it's even better because you don't have this like preconceived notion of, you know, oh, he's doing the character from this movie here, or like,
Hmm.
oh, this is not much difference than the character that he played. You put Matt Damon in that role, and it's like,
Right.
well, you know.
You have some expectations. Your brain already starts doing math, and yeah, totally.
So
I
how
get
did
that.
you come up with the idea for the story?
Well, it's funny, I borrow from Stephen King for this part of it, and that like, he says good stories won't leave you alone because, anybody as creative has 1,000 ideas a day, easy, a dozen ideas a day. So this one was one of those stories that kind of wouldn't leave me alone. I come from up north in the middle of Maine, like in the middle of the woods where I grew up in lumber country. We got a I'm old enough that we went to school super early in August and had 2 weeks for potato harvest. We
Nice.
took off in September. So it was back when that's what the whole town did, and North Woods, you hear stories and what does it mean now that lumbering and when towns shrink because their main source of income or the industry that's there isn't there, or machines come in and make it more efficient, what all these people do. And I was going to kind of write a story a little bit like somehow about that. Um, and then funny enough, through an improv teacher that I have, I still take acting classes. I'm in the Hollywood game a little bit. And she kind of reminded the class at one point that we don't all have to be real people. Like, we're playing with our imagination here in our scenes that we're doing off the cuff. She's like, be a unicorn, be something magical, be like, it doesn't always have to be we're having dinner. Like, we can do that already. We have a million examples of that. And it made me go like, oh yeah, like people love Harry Potter, people like magic, people like vampires. Like, how can I make this a little more fun? So there's like a werewolf aspect to this that adds a little magic and fun. There's a kind of a nudge to Arthurian legend in it because I thought that would be fun to mix in. There's a little nudge to actual characters that are a part of history that um, maybe they didn't die, maybe they came back in this kind of form that this town called Forge in the North Woods is. So yeah, the idea of a of that time of the U.S. where there wasn't a lot of industry, it was just kind of the industrialization of the country just kind of coming online, like with how much we're on our phones and how much technology plays in our lives, like what would it mean to go back to that time and kind of tell a story that we get to reflect upon. We can take the phones away, we can even take cars away, we go back to horses, and maybe it's just me getting older, I don't know, where it's like you kind of yearn for the time when it's
Yeah.
like, man, it was nice to just stare at a campfire and be bored for a second, as
Yeah.
opposed to getting sucked up on your phone every second.
Yeah. I
So yeah,
grew
the
up with,
story's kind of been in my head a little bit, and yeah, just finally once COVID hit, I finally put it down, essentially, on
yeah,
the page.
I grew up without cell phones as well. So like
Mm.
I get it. We
Yep.
did you know, ton of camping. I was a dirt bike
Yeah.
racer when I was
Oh,
growing up,
fun.
and
That's
we
great.
traveled all over the place, going to different races, and
Yeah.
phones just weren't
That's
a thing back then. You kind of
yeah. Yeah,
hung out with the
we
family and figured it out.
yeah, we had just a couple small dirt bikes as kids. We weren't ever into the racing, but we had 65 acres and we tore up the fields and the woods and everything else with those things and
Ah,
figured out
jealous.
figured out how to, put a chain back together when you're half a mile from home and,
Yeah.
all the rest of it, or push it up that hill so you could coast down the next one to get all the way home,
Yeah.
things like that. So just being
It teaches
resourceful.
you to be self-reliant in a lot of
Yeah.
ways because you're out in the middle
Yeah.
of nowhere.
Yep. You
And
got to
if you
figure
don't
it
want to
out.
be walking back, you
Yeah.
kind of got to
Yeah.
figure things out. Like
Exactly.
we always kept like a roll of baling wire wrapped around the fork
Yep.
tube on one of the
Yep.
bikes, and
Oh,
you
sure.
kept a couple wrenches under the seat, and
Yep.
something went wrong, like you had to figure it out. I remember we took my uncle with us one time, and he was riding this really old, just piece of shit bike that he borrowed
Mm-hmm.
from somebody, and it had like a drum rear brake that used
Oh,
like a rod that went from your foot lever to
okay.
like the actual,
Yeah, it
brake in
wasn't
the
a cable, it
back.
was a rod instead.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
this
yeah.
rod broke and popped off, and we had a
Oh,
roll of baling wire on us, so we were able to like baling wire
figure
this
it
thing
out.
back together and figure it out. And I asked him
Yeah.
about it recently. He's like, I don't remember that. And I'm like,
Dude,
I remember it.
dude, baling wire. Dude, that's like everything. Use it for everything.
Oh
A
yeah.
fuse goes out in the truck, you just wire it up with that. You're like,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised what you could actually fix with
You
that
can do
stuff.
all kinds
It's
of
like
stuff with baling
it's like
wire.
back in the day duct tape. It's like
Yep.
that's what they use instead of duct tape for everything.
Yep.
Oh my God, it's so funny. That's great. So yeah, the idea was in me for a long time, and this is kind of the one that came out. But yeah, it's fun because it has magical elements. It's for sure about a young boy becoming a man and what that means, and the underpinnings of the book, without giving too much away, are like, what does it mean to grow up in a healthy masculine? Because I feel like there's this, you don't want to sound too trite these days, but there's good things about being a man, and there's a way that we can help bring up young men that is very productive and very
Yeah.
positive for the world and for society at large. And it's just like anything. You swing too far one way and things get weird, and you swing too far the other way and things get weird. And I'm trying to maybe through a fictional story kind of be like, hey, what if this, even though it's magical and there's werewolves and magic and the rest of it, like what would it mean for, you know, a young man to suffer loss and still find a way to become everything that he could be? So I think it's an important story.
Did you know that it was going to be a series from the start, or did you kind of just plan on it being one book, and as you went, it's like, oh, there's a lot more to this story? Like, how did that kind of go?
I kind of thought it was going to be, I thought it would be like 3 books, but now I'm thinking it might be 4 because as I was writing what I thought was going to be the first book, I found myself doing a lot of like just exposition explaining in that the you know you it was feeling like almost like an encyclopedia entry,
Mhm.
and then this is how this works, and this is how this works, and this is how this works, and I was like, this is boring even me to write. Like I need a story to get us into it. So this story is It's almost like, at the risk of using Harry Potter, the the first Harry Potter book is short, but it just kind of tells you this is the world we're living in. She could have written 30 pages of here's why there's this place called
Yeah.
Hogwarts, and there's classes, and you have to make sure that, and there's the game called Quidditch, and but that would have been boring as hell. Instead, excuse me. Instead, she writes about Harry Potter who comes into this world, and we come into the world with him, and then we're like, okay, now I get it, and then you start having the real fun.
Yeah.
Of course, there's fun in that first book, and there's a proper hero's arc and the rest of it, but it's really about setting up the world, and that's kind of what this book is as well. It's like here's one kid's journey into this world, and now we get to have the fun. So I thought there would be 3 books because I kind of had an outline of what I thought would happen as a general idea in each book. I'm not a huge outliner, but I kind of had a general idea. And then as I was writing what I thought was the first book, I was like, wait a second, this is boring as hell. Let's have a first book before this that kind of leads us into it instead.
That makes
So,
sense. It's got to be a
yeah.
difficult spot to be in. Like, you know, do I find this interesting? Would other people find it interesting? So,
Yeah.
like, for me, like, for some reason, I like a lot of the technical stuff in the sci-fi that I
Hmm.
read. Like, I
Sure.
want to know how the ship functions. If you're in a
Mm,
ship and you've got some sort of warp drive or
right.
some sort of like wormhole generator, like I want to know
Right.
how it works. To
Yeah.
me,
Let's
like
get in
that's
there.
some of the most interesting points. Like, let's
Sure.
see if this guy like did some homework and figured out like how could this work? You know what I
Right.
mean?
And what
And
is a stretch and what makes sense, right?
yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
times they'll just introduce something and not tell you how. So like the book that I'm reading right now, they have these things called fission knives.
Oh, that sounds crazy cool.
Yeah, but that's all I know about it. It's called a fission knife and it glows and it
You're like,
cuts and it cuts through stuff. They
you're
didn't
like,
he didn't explain how it works. You know what
can
I
you give me a
mean?
paragraph? Just a
Yeah, just
paragraph,
give me
right?
something. Like tell me how this thing works. Like it's interesting. You have me
Mm.
captivated with it. Like
Right.
great. Like how does it
Right.
get hot? How does it what is it how is it
Right.
a knife doing fission? Like give me
Right.
something on it,
Oh my
And
God.
so like I'm a writer as well and I've had a book that I've been working on for a couple of years now. It
Okay.
started out you know, about one thing, and it still kind of has a bit of the bare bones to the story, but it's evolved a lot. And luckily
Uh-huh.
for me, like I was down on myself pretty hard for not writing it earlier on, and with
Okay.
when after I got injured, and
Right.
like the idea was kind of like I was gonna write like an autobiography, essentially of
Sure.
like I've had a crazy life, lots of
Right.
different crazy things have happened to me, and then I decided, like, you know what? I wouldn't be interested in reading that. Like, I just don't like books like that.
Oh my
They're
God, it's so good.
boring.
It's
And
so good.
I
Ah, I'm
so
not as
I'm in a,
interesting as I thought.
yeah, exactly. Well, like other
Right,
people have
right.
still said,
On some level,
but the
right.
point is like I'll take my story and kind of inject it into a book that I would be interested in, that I would
Totally.
like. So it's
Totally.
now like the lead character of that book is kind of based on me. We
Yep.
have the same background, but then he comes into this post-apocalyptic situation where
Way better. Right. Way
yeah,
better.
exactly. And my
Yeah.
my idea for him was like, okay, how would I hope that I handled this situation if I was put
Ah,
into it?
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how it would happen or what I would do, but this is how I hope I would do it,
That's
essentially.
great.
You know,
That's
and that
great.
was kind of the idea. And, I've been kind of like living with one foot in this story for a couple years now. And I'm
Yeah.
glad now that I didn't start writing it earlier because the story's evolved so much that
Oh,
like
sure.
the previous version, if I would have written it then, it wouldn't have been nearly as good. And I've kind of come up with a lot of stuff. And a lot of that like came down to like ChatGPT and Grok
Oh,
coming out because it's pretty, especially with like the technical aspects of science fiction, you can kind
sure.
of prod them for different
Oh,
how would this
sure.
work? How would that work? Like,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
could
yeah.
you explain this? And, maybe that's even something that you could look into too. Like, hey, Grok, hey, ChatGPT, how would, if there was a werewolf, if werewolves were
Right.
real, how would that work with DNA? Is there some
Yeah.
sort of mutation that would
Yep.
allow this to, like,
Yep.
kind of like what Peter Watts did with his book and making, the were or the vampires within that book.
Mhm.
One of the
Mhm.
interesting parts of that book was he kind of explained the cross. You show a
Oh,
vampire a cross,
yeah,
and he
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, the reason that these things kind of died out and we had to bring them back from the dead was because they had some sort of affinity for right angles that
Oh,
threw them into
interesting.
epileptic seizures.
Shocks or something. Okay,
So
okay.
anytime so when you showed them the cross, it
It just
wasn't
short
it
circuits their
wasn't,
stuff.
Christ that was coming in
Right.
and destroying them.
Oh my
It was
gosh,
short-circuiting
interesting.
their brain from the right angles within it, and
Interesting.
it was
That's good.
interesting, right? And,
Yeah.
like, one of the other explanations he had was, like, imagine, if we were you look at, like, the Serengeti, you've got
Right.
a couple of lions for every couple of thousands of gazelles, right? Like you've
Right.
got far less predators than you have
Sure.
prey species. So
Right.
imagine if humans were a prey species to these vampires, there would be far fewer of them.
Right. Right. Right.
And why would they hibernate? Well, maybe because they would come in and kind of decimate the population and then have to go
Right.
back into hibernating while our numbers went back up again.
Yeah,
And there was just
totally.
all of this interesting stuff that got you captivated in the story because, like, there was some actual thought put into it. It wasn't just like, this guy's a vampire, enjoy type
You're
of
right,
thing.
right.
You
No.
know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because like one of the things that we that we really took some time on in the second chapter is the first spell that our main witch casts. And I had written my wife is I'm fortunate that she has a master's degree in education and she's taught English, and I'm very fortunate that I literally fall asleep every night next to someone who's really got a grasp on story, who's taught Shakespeare and that sort of thing. And I came up with these spells that rhymed and were kind of cool. And she was like, okay, hold on a second. Like, if you want this book to be deep and be the way you want it to be, like, these have to mean something. Like, they got to call in some. And just like you're saying, like, there's got to be a justification or a depth or a calling that even if you don't know details, you can tell as the reader that, like, that there is something underneath this, you know? And like the first stanza of her spell is since Gilgamesh your song was sung by Silver Moon and Silver Tongue. Now we know that Gilgamesh is an old story.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know what Gilgamesh exactly is like, well, I remember that from like
Yeah.
high school. That's like a really old thing, you know? So since Gilgamesh your song was sung, okay, this is really old by Silver Moon and Silver Tongue. You're like, wait, there's a silver thing. I know silver is like, is that werewolves?
Yeah.
Is that vampire? What is that? You know, here a blade to cut the skin. From these words, a spell begins. So you're like, oh, there's like blood in this spell. And, you know, it's like, it's a very, as opposed to just, yeah, let's cast the spell. And exactly what you're talking about, I feel like is one of the funnest parts about writing either sci-fi or magic is justifying, for me anyway, I like a little bit of like realism magic where exactly what you're talking about, where you can justify why this magic works because
Yeah.
this plant grows next to this one, so they have a relationship, or you know these different things actually happen in real life, or germinating something, and as that grows, the spell grows, or
Yeah.
you know the justification is the really fun part because as readers and as people, I feel like we love stuff that is logical but still surprising.
Yeah.
Like we love stuff like that. Be like, oh, that's a good way to think about
Yeah.
that. You know, it works for humor, it works for
Absolutely.
horror, and it works for when you're building a world too. It's like you said, like if oh he's a vampire, yeah, you're like okay,
Why? Why? How?
yeah,
Give me
how,
something, you know?
yeah, give me something, yeah,
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 Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is
yep,
indistinguishable from magic.
sure is,
And
sure is,
we're, like what we're doing right now would be
yep,
magic to people
oh,
that are
totally,
still alive today, on
totally,
other parts of the world. Sentinel Island, these, down in the Amazon jungle. If you told people
yeah,
that, like, hey, the
check it
earth
out,
is
look at
really
this,
big,
yeah,
and we can talk to each other from farther away than you can see. They
yeah,
wouldn't even have the ability to comprehend that. And that's people that
yeah,
are alive today.
yeah,
Imagine people that were alive hundreds or thousands of years ago. Like you wouldn't
hmm,
be able to even explain
yeah,
electricity to them, let alone
oh
like
my
how
god,
something like this would work. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And yeah, man, like I think that magic, like I've read books with magic in them before, and
hmm,
sometimes it's like a gimmick where people use it as like just kind of a
as a cop
like
out almost.
a lazy way of
Mm,
not having to explain a real
sure,
life situation. And
sure,
then
sure.
other people like Dune didn't have like magic per se in it,
Right,
but it kind of teetered on the line of magic in a
correct.
lot of
Yeah, like
ways,
there's
you
stuff
know?
happening here we can't quite explain,
Yep.
but it's
Yep.
happening, and that's fun.
The water and like all that crazy stuff.
Yeah,
Like there was a lot of, semi voodoo magic type stuff going
right,
on in that story. And
right,
Dune's
and we
freaking
love it.
great. Like it's a fabulous story. It's, very deep
Mm,
book.
yeah, it's a great story. It's a great
So
story.
one of the things that I struggle with writing is, like I said, like I've been kind of living within this story as I write it, as I think of the ideas, as
Mm,
like I figure out, how would he do this? Why would he do this? What would be a better way to do this? And I kind of don't allow my brain to go past this story.
mm,
And I
okay.
don't really have a ton of ideas. You said earlier that like a creative person has 1,000 ideas a day.
Oh
I
my god,
must not
yes.
be as creative as you because I don't have any like major like, oh, this would be an idea for a
Oh
different book, or
god,
this is how I could
my
take it
god.
past this situation. Like and maybe it's because I don't really allow my brain to wander out of the story that I'm
Right,
writing
too much?
now because,
Yeah.
if you get too far ahead of yourself, then you're
Yeah.
kind of like it's kind of like paying attention to something else while you're driving. It can work for a
Yes.
while, but pretty soon you're gonna hit something and
Right, you're
it's
gonna
not
hit
gonna
something,
go
yeah.
well, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So, has that ever, like, been the case where did you worry, like, as you're writing this, like, "Holy crap, how am I gonna make this a series?" Or, like,
Oh,
"What am I gonna
I
do
mean,
after this one?" Like, I don't
yeah,
know.
it's funny you say that because as I finished the first book, I was thinking, "Well, I know where I want the second book to go, but I've set up all these things in the first book that are kinda asking some things are asking to get paid off or" and it has been really tricky with the second book to decide how I wanna get there because I I kind of know, like, the last scene or the punchline of the first book, but it doesn't seem meaningful to me yet. And with this book, funny enough, when I finally figured out the final scene, I wasn't done writing the book yet, but I figured out the final scene, and all of a sudden I thought I have to earn this now. And how can I get to this really magnificent kind of finish of the book, which I think is a really good payoff. Um, and that really, really helped. I know where the second book where I wanted to finish is kind of a plot point, but I don't know yet the emotional truth or the emotional discovery or the theme, I guess. I mean, it's tricky to write theme because the theme usually kind of arrives after the book is finished. You kind of go back in and
Yeah.
pull out theme a little bit more that way. But yeah, that's been the challenge to be okay. I know this event is going to happen, but how can I imbibe it with more meaning, more metaphor, more magic, more um, yeah, and part of the trick of that is that, like I mentioned before, I was kind of writing that second book at first, and then I backed up and wrote this book. So some of the stuff that I had already written makes sense and I really liked, and then some of it doesn't. So one of the tricks of writing, which I'm sure you've encountered, is you have to, they say, kill your babies, right?
Yeah.
Where you have this thing, it's like, this is amazing. Oh my God. And it doesn't fit at all. Like, ugh, whether it's a line or a character or a chapter, you often have to go back and say, according to the greater story, this doesn't actually fall in here, or it's just slowing
Yeah.
things down, or it puts us on a detour that doesn't get us where we're going.
But,
So,
one of the things I learned in college is you don't ever throw that stuff away
oh
because
no, yeah, it's
you
in a
might
notebook
you
somewhere.
might have to come back to it at some point. You might be writing something else where it's like, "Oh, that thing that I had
Yeah.
0 use for 6 months ago is
Yeah.
now important, and it
Yeah.
saves you time and effort, and it
Yeah.
doesn't, make you
Yeah.
burn
Totally.
something that you think is worthwhile."
Yeah. The and the other thing too with this is that a lot of my other ideas, like 1,000 ideas a day that I kind of joked about, was most of those have nothing to do with the moonshine story.
Yeah.
So it'll be driving around, and be like, "Oh, that's a good one. Well, yeah, okay. Oh well." and off it goes. You know, you toss it up in
Ah,
the air and
yeah.
just let it go. But for the 2 minutes you have it in your head, it's that's a good
Yeah.
connection there. Oh, that's really funny. All right, see ya. You
So
know, just another one, another one.
I've got a set of notes in my iPad here
Oh
where
my gosh.
like dude, it's I don't even know how many pages the notes are. Like it's just it goes on forever and
Oh,
ever and
forever.
ever,
Yeah, yeah,
because every time I think of something like that that has to do with the story, I just write it in there.
yep,
And every once in a while, I kind of just go, okay, let's go through the notes. And I'll go through and I'll be like, holy shit, I completely forgot about that. And like, I
yep,
can use that here and I can use
yep,
this there. And,
yep.
like as you go, I kind of try and delete them as I
Right,
use
right,
them.
right.
But it's ended up being worthwhile. At one point, I was like, what am I going to do with all these freaking notes? Like, there's so
Yeah,
many notes here, and
yeah.
like, there's just no way that I'm going to use them all. But I do have, because like I said earlier, I kind of like live within the story in a way because I've been thinking about this for so long and like
Mhm,
even longer than I've been writing about it. And it just
mhm.
sometimes like I'll be listening to audiobooks and I don't I try not to get influenced too much by the books that I'm listening to. I
Right,
want
right.
it to be my voice, to be my story. I
Of
don't want
course.
to regurgitate ideas, but there's only so many different theories that you can have within science fiction and people use the same ideas all the
Oh,
time
yeah.
within it.
It's the
So,
same story,
yeah.
really, over and
So
over. It really is,
sometimes I'll
you know?
hear something on a sci-fi book and I'll just go, "Oh, that's interesting. Like maybe I can use that in this way or I can
Yeah,
kind of change it to be like this."
yeah.
And, sometimes I'll have kind of the idea written down before I listen to it and I go, "Well, at least I have it written down and a
Yeah.
time and date stamp on it."
Right.
So if
Yeah.
somebody ever gives me shit for plagiarism, I go,
Right.
no, I thought about
No,
this
I got it.
before I
It's
listened
right
to this
there.
book.
Well, you're hoping too. I find that we're always looking for serendipity too,
Yeah.
right? Where you read an old note or you watch a TV show and you think, there it is. Oh, that's the connection that I was looking for. I didn't even consider that this guy's vehicle matches that guy's fingerprint or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's some weird thing that you will get from some other intake and often that's exactly the thing that you're looking for. And I don't see that as plagiarism necessarily. Like I was saying, it's all the same story, really. You know,
Yeah.
it's either the good guy gets
I
the
mean,
girl
how
or he
many different books are there with werewolves and vampires?
a million, but at the
You
same
know?
time, like it's you know, okay, the good guy kills the bad guy and gets the girl. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well,
The
now there's
hero's journey.
now it's Spider-Man and he's gonna do okay, let me
Yeah.
see that one. Okay, now it's Superman. He's okay, yeah, let me see that. It's the same story, kill the bad guy, get the girl, you know, over and over and over, but it's just a little bit different. Now he's now he's King Arthur. You're like, okay, let me see that one. But it's all the same thing, just a little bit different. So I'm never too worried about recycling ideas. I mean, yes, you don't want to plagiarize someone, but who is it was saying that, some things you can kind of get away with and other things, you can't call something that you can stick your hand out and pull toward you. You just can't call that the force
Yeah.
because Star Wars has the
Yeah.
force. So you can't use that, but you can come up with some other reason that you can kinesis, move things with your mind or something else.
Yeah. And
So
not
I always
only
get a
can
giggle
you
out of that.
not
So
do that because it's, the force, but also you
yes.
don't want to do that because you don't want the reader to go, well, that was
Oh, that
lazy. Like everybody knows what the force is. You can't just
right.
have him say these drones aren't looking,
Right,
these
right.
aren't
These are
the
not the
people
droids you're looking for.
drones. Yeah, you can't do that for a bunch of
Right.
different reasons. Not
Right.
like let alone from the copyright
Right.
problems
Right.
with it.
Right.
Like you just don't want
Just
people to
lazy.
think like this is lazy. And that's one of
Right.
the things that bothers me the most about, a book when I'll read it and I go, well, that was just lazy. You could have
Mm,
put
mm,
20 minutes of thought into this and figured
right.
out like would this
Yeah.
and another thing that bothers me is like when you have holes within the plot or something like that where
Mm,
you
mm.
I can sit back and think about it for 2 minutes and go, well, if you just did A, B, or C, then this wouldn't
You
happen.
could have
Or
closed
like,
it up.
why would this
Hmm.
person do that? That's stupid. And you could
Yeah.
have just done it this way instead.
Mm,
Or,
mm.
oh, you've got this coincidence where the two people that are, pivotal to stopping the alien invasion that's going to
Right.
kill everybody on Earth already knew each other before this happened. And now all
Right.
of a sudden they're, this
Right.
husband and ex-wife are so now they're the heroes. They haven't talked to
Right.
each other in 20 years, but it's like,
Look at that.
yeah, it's just
Yeah.
like, come on, guys?
Yeah.
Like, give us
I had that a
something.
few times when I was writing where I opened up a loop and like didn't close it. And I realized, okay, I don't even need that loop. Or I had a loop open and was thinking, oh, wait, I haven't closed that loop. And sometimes you do want to leave them open. Sometimes at the end of the book, I always think
Yeah,
of when I had my friends read it, I'm like, well, I want to know what questions you have. Because some questions I want you to have, and some questions I don't want you to have. Like what's going to happen, this and that. Great. That's a great question. But you're like, but if you're thinking, well, who is this person? Then you have to think, oh, you should know who that is. Like I must not have outlined that
yeah.
properly or given enough depth to it or whatever.
And then
So yeah.
sometimes, like, you figure it out as you go. There's like, I've
Mm,
got this problem that I can't really figure out. Whatever, I'll just press forward and
mm,
kind of like keep considering it and think about it and fix it in post or something like
yeah,
that. You know what I
exactly.
mean? And then
Exactly.
as you write, it kind of just figures itself out. And you go,
Yes.
oh, okay, now I just have to go back to here, insert a
Yep.
couple paragraphs about this and that, and then
Yep.
bang, boom, I'm
Yep.
in like Flint, good to go.
Yeah, we
So
did that a couple times too as we were writing. We was
yeah,
like, oh wait, if we just revamp this chapter, this 2 pages, it'll pay off way over here.
yeah,
It's always a fun feeling when your brain has actually had enough coffee where it makes those connections for you.
yeah. So
Yeah.
one of my favorite writers named Alistair Reynolds, he's
Okay.
a science fiction author. He wrote a series of books called Revelation Space, which is just the guy
Right.
is really incredible. Like he knows so much about so many things, or
Mm-hmm.
he does so much research. Like as I started going and like doing research into certain aspects of like the technology that's introduced within the book, like
Mm-hmm.
it takes a while. It takes a long
Right.
while sometimes to figure
Okay.
something out, and, like, I'll go back and listen to one of his books and go, "Man, I bet that one paragraph took him, like, 3 hours worth of
Yeah,
research,
yeah.
5
Sure.
hours worth of research." Unless he
Sure.
just knows everything off the top of his he's one of those
You one of
guys that
those
knows
guys. Yeah.
everything about everything, like, this required some serious thought and some
Right.
serious research. So, like, did you have to do a lot of research for the book, or was this kind of, like, stuff that you knew?
Yes and no. Some of the stuff as far as like setting in that sort of thing, I knew, but I already talked about the spells a little bit. Those we went super deep on. Those took, I mean, it's maybe open the book here. I think it's how many stanzas? Like it's um one, two, three, four, five, six or seven stanzas, eight maybe. That it took us 3 days. Took us 3 days to write
Yeah,
those eight stanzas because we wanted there to be like the Gilgamesh thing. We wanted there to be depth in it. We wanted it to make sense. We wanted it to have some foreshadowing. We wanted to reflect a past that we want you to have questions and be curious about.
yeah,
So yeah, there was a lot of that. And I did do a lot of research on a lot of the spells and some of the magic in here is exactly what you're talking about, how to justify it. How do we make this make sense and how does it make sense in this world? And, there's a little bit of wonderful blood magic that we justify how the werewolves take shape. And there's some, how do we, is it just a bite? How does that work? Do you transform from that? So we had a lot of fun figuring out what the truths were in this world. And that led me down a lot of rabbit holes of werewolves in different cultures because I take for granted that I know it from the Western
yeah,
perspective, from the American perspective, but like, does it mean anything in China? Are there wolfmen there? Are there wolfmen in Africa? Are there wolfmen? And it turns out there is, and they have tweaks on the story, and that makes it more fun too because you're using stuff that you picked up from a different culture, and even if like as Westerners reading that we don't know that, it still feels grounded for some reason because it has a million people who believe that story about werewolves. So yeah, we did some deep dives for sure for some of this stuff, but I imagine like anything, like there's a reason you're writing about what you're writing about
yeah,
because it feels close and you don't have to think about a lot of it, but
yeah,
then there's a certain amount of excitement when you come upon something where you think, oh, that's interesting, I want the story to go here, but I need to justify that, and I know there's a way I can do that, but I need to dig a little deeper. Um, and that's where I found that's, of course, we can always have analysis paralysis where 3 days
yeah,
later you're still researching
yep,
and you're thinking, maybe I should put some words down on the page now.
yeah.
Maybe that's enough of that. So, yeah.
So, like, one of the reasons I'm writing the book, like I kind of explained earlier, is like I've
Hmm.
had a crazy life, and I think that, people with crazy lives should share it with other people, like
Yeah.
for entertainment purposes, for, learning purposes. Don't do what I did. don't end
Mm.
up looking like me. This is what happened. This is kind of like how it
Right.
happened and why. And, don't
Yeah.
go down the path that I went down essentially.
Right.
And, personally, like I don't have kids, so I'm not
Hmm.
really like at this point, at least not leaving
Right.
anything behind when I go. So it's kind of cool to be able to leave something behind
Yeah.
that'll last forever. And,
Yeah.
like we live in one of the craziest time periods in human history,
Yeah.
and it's going to be studied, by
Oh,
future humans for years and years and years. And like,
there's truth
you
to
know,
that.
one of the first things that kind of like got me to think about, the long term was stuff like this is I remember like during COVID, like Joe Rogan did a podcast where he addressed future people in the beginning and like
Oh my
gave the
gosh.
date. And it was just like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, people are going to go back and they're going to watch this. They're going to listen to this and they're going to wonder,
What's going on?
when this medium first started, like, how did it happen? Why did it happen? What was
Oh yeah.
captivating about it? And even a smaller show like this, like, there people are gonna at some point, somebody's going to go back
Take
and
something
watch
up.
it
Yeah.
and listen to it and find out like why I thought the way I did and
Yeah.
why I had on the guests that I did and
Yeah.
this stuff will be studied, and I think
Yeah.
books are the same way, and, for me, I don't really plan on, like, making any money, especially with the first one,
Right.
and I don't know that I'll write a second one, to be quite honest with you, because it's a
Right.
lot of work, like, the carpal
It is.
tunnel is real when you're
Oh,
typing an entire book with one
with
finger,
one
like,
hand. Oh
it's
my
it's
god.
it's an absolute chore, and I
Oh
don't
my
type
god.
very fast, and for me, like, the text to talk to text
Oh
is just
yeah. I'm sure
weird
it's a
and
save. It's
clunky,
a
and
savior.
I I don't use it personally,
Oh
like,
really?
no, I feel weird doing it. It's just it doesn't work for me. I don't
Right. Right. I found
and
it
I end up
easy.
having to, like, edit it more
Yeah, a
than
lot. Yeah.
I
Then it's worth.
would with written. So,
Yeah.
anyways, this that rant where I was going with that is
Yeah.
that, like, I
People are
was
gonna
gonna
look back
ask
on it.
you,
Yeah.
so is this something where if you make money, great. If not, no big deal. Are you gonna keep writing them if there's no money within it? Or,
Uh,
after the 3rd one, are you gonna go, "Well, if it doesn't take off after the 3rd one, I'm just gonna spend my time doing something
yeah,
else?"
that's interesting. Like, of course, we would like to be rewarded for the art that we make,
Yeah,
of course. But I would like to think that I probably really can't judge that until the third book or the fourth one,
sure.
maybe. I would think that that's when I can finally judge that properly. Um, the feedback I've gotten, granted, it's been a lot of friends and the rest of it, has been positive and they like it. And I have one friend she's a middle school teacher, and I asked her what she thought of the book and especially the last chapter. And she's like, "Oh, you mean when I threw it against the wall because you left me on a cliffhanger?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, good. That's good to know." So um, you want that kind of reaction from people. So I think once the story's kind of complete, the good thing about the world that I've kind of set up is that there's all kinds of room for kind of little one-off spoof books on just like I was mentioning earlier about a character where you could easily write, oh, like there's a great character in here named Vadoma. She's wonderful and magical. She has card magic and it's super, super fun. And, when you listen to it or read it or whatever you do, you'll be like, oh, yeah, I want to know more about her. And she could easily have her own book story that just comes from this, but isn't tied into all of the story that is Moonshine. It's like Rogue One. There's this thing that happens over here, and it informs what's happening, but you don't have to necessarily know that to appreciate one or the other. So there's depending on if I want to go this, or I've written a little bit of sci-fi too. I wrote a fun thing about it's called the Martian Triangle, where they figure out that all the ships that have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle end up on Mars.
Oh, cool.
You know, kind of a cool concept. So I've dabbled in that as well. And there's a couple other stories I have. There's a horror story I have about zombies on a container ship that I think is pretty fun. And there, like I said, there's a million ideas in there. It's just how can you? It's hard to choose one, and then to give the time to justify the story and to make it really good. It's one thing I think to just write a story out, and it's another thing to take the time to honor what the story should be. And that's like you're saying, where the challenge is, where you're like, oh, okay, this is going to take a second if I want to. And sometimes people can write that. They can do that. And, oh, yeah, I wrote it in 6 months or I wrote it in 2 months. It just kind of came out of me. And amazing. But that for sure is not the way that I write. I am
Yeah.
easily 12, 13, 14 drafts of something, before it really kind of locks in.
A lot of
So
words. A
yeah, a
lot
lot
of
of
words.
words, a lot of thinking, and a lot of editing. Writing is rewriting. That's for sure true for me, for
Yeah.
sure.
I can
Yeah,
imagine, like, sometimes I'll
yeah,
go through some of the old stuff, what was I thinking there?
yeah,
And I don't even
yeah,
and I don't
yeah.
remember that part, like, what was I thinking about that? That doesn't make any sense, or that's
Which hand was I
stupid, or
typing with?
that's yeah,
Jeez,
exactly. Who wrote that? It wasn't me, that's for damn sure.
right?
So, I've
Yeah.
always been interested, like, in our ancient past, we have
Hmm.
such a tiny understanding of the people that came before us, and I
Hmm.
think that, like, we don't give people in the past enough credit for how smart they are or
Sure.
were. I mean, the only interesting class that I took in college was about Greek mythology, and it was
Oh my gosh.
like we read like the Theban plays on fate, and
Hmm.
it was interesting, and you read it and you go, man, these people are freaking smart,
Oh yeah.
and there's so many stories from around the world about magic,
Right.
werewolves, dragons, like all of
Yeah.
these different things that modern day scientists will tell you, oh, these were just analogies or stories or
Hmm.
whatever. And then you read some of the stuff that they wrote and you go, no, these people were smart. They weren't so
Yeah.
stupid that they like weren't capable of discerning the
Understanding.
difference between a bird and a dragon, or
Yeah.
like a normal wolf and a werewolf, like,
Yeah.
so like where do you think some of these stories about the stuff that you're writing about come from? Like, did you believe in them before you
Well,
started writing? Did anything change as you were going?
it's funny because I mean, especially as kids, like we've all had to run downstairs and turn off the light and then run back up the stairs, and you're positive something was chasing you,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't. My wife's got a great story about she did some teaching for one of the Native American reservations when she was in college, and about them sitting them down and completely serious saying, okay, so when you walk from, this Pueblo to the other one, make sure you don't look behind yourself,
Yeah.
especially if you feel somebody, because if you turn, then the skinwalkers will turn and they'll take your soul. And they were saying, what? Just don't. And they were completely serious. You're like, oh, okay. Like it doesn't take much convincing for your brain to say, okay, that's oh, don't turn around. All right. So I think that there's, for sure there's a confidence and a wonderful bit of science that like we understand the world more deeply in many many ways, and the fact that we're all made from stardust literally I
Yeah.
think is a great way to see ourselves. But I think there still is something alchemical or magical about people and the world, that we can embrace those things that we don't understand. And if we're calling them magic for now, great. If we find that, I mean, what I think a lot of the dragon myths come from is probably they probably found fossils. They probably found dinosaur bones
Dinosaur
somewhere, and they
bones.
were
Yeah.
like, wait a second. Okay, that rumbling that we heard the other day, that in the ground shook, they didn't know about earthquakes. That must have been a dragon. That must have been one of these things. That must have, it's the same thing that we're doing with, I mean, there's story, we have story in our lives, whether we want to or not. We tell ourselves a story when we wake up in the morning of how our day is going to go. We tell ourselves a story about the world in general. So to have evidence back then when they didn't understand everything of something more mystical, I think I mean, we're looking for those things. And if we don't have them in our hand, we'll make up stuff.
Yeah.
So I would say that for sure there's a little bit of there's a little bit of a kid in all of us, that wants to be the guy on the horse with the sword, or the guy with a lightsaber, or, we all want to be that person. So um, I don't know about, I would love for there to be a Sasquatch. I think that'd
Sure.
be super cool.
Yeah.
I think
I'm
that'd be
I'm right
fun.
there with you. I don't
You
know if
know,
it's
I
real or
I
not, but it would
I
be
think we're
cool.
gonna find life on other planets. I think we'll
Yeah.
find shrimp or something on Europa. I don't know if it's gonna be walking around like we are, but I suspect that life in the universe isn't nearly as, I mean, maybe quote unquote intelligent life
Yeah.
is unique, but I don't think that it wouldn't surprise me at all. Like shrimp on Europa is the thing I kind of come back to. It's
Yeah.
like there's frozen stuff down there. There's plumes. There's got to be something down there.
Yeah.
Um,
I think we're gonna
so
find a lot of slime, a lot of bacteria,
Yeah,
a lot of stuff like
like
that.
it may not be like us, but it wouldn't surprise me a bit if there's, like you said, slime, bacteria, something like it wouldn't surprise me. Um, so yeah, I think we have to leave ourselves. I think the minute you think you have all the answers, it stops being fun.
Yeah.
So I like being open to the imagination of what the answer could be. And
Yeah.
like we talked about earlier, justifying, okay, I want this to be the answer. Let me
Yeah.
justify that. And you have a lot of fun writing that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of time, like, scientists are stuck in a box and they're not willing to, like, go out on a limb and say, okay, well, if this is real, because so many people have said that it is over
Right.
history, like, how could it work? And
Yeah.
I was interviewing a sci-fi author a couple months ago, and we were talking about like telepathy and psychics and
Mm.
stuff like that. And I
No, fun.
started thinking, like, okay, so if that was real, how would it work? How could you
Mm.
explain it scientifically? And
Sure.
so there's this physicist named Roger Penrose, Sir Roger Penrose. Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't forgot that. He'd probably be angry if I didn't give him his full title. Anyways, he has a theory that like there's a quantum aspect to consciousness that
Sure.
it essentially like I can't really explain his theory all that well. So I
Right.
started
But we're
thinking
tied
about
together
that
essentially.
and I go, well, if there's a quantum aspect to consciousness, and like I tend to believe that like consciousness exists outside of our minds, and our brain
Mm.
is more of like an antenna, radio antenna that picks up a
Sure.
signal rather
Sure.
than like makes the signal itself.
Right.
So like
Yep.
if
Yep.
that was the case, you
Yep.
would have this well of consciousness that we all kind of tap into a little bit of it.
Sure.
And then there's this quantum aspect to it. Okay, well, quantum entanglement is a real thing,
Yep.
spooky action at a distance. So
Yep.
if that is the case, then what if we're all quantumly entangled with each other?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the closer you are to a person, the more, you know,
Entangled you could be.
tight that entanglement is, and the
Yep.
easier it is for you to like sense their feelings and to sense their thoughts. And
Yep.
like that could explain, like, we've all had a situation where we know that somebody's about to call us. You're thinking
Yeah.
about somebody, and then all of a sudden they call you, like
Yep.
that has happened to literally everybody
Everybody.
on earth, from
Yeah.
time to time. And a
Yep.
lot of people more than once. Like it happens to me quite a bit where I'll be thinking about something, and all
Right.
of a sudden I'll get a call, and like
Yeah.
it's
Oh my
about
gosh,
that.
there it is. Yep.
People have like I've never had this feeling, but like people have like known when somebody in their family dies
Yeah.
unexpectedly,
Yep.
like
Yep.
if somebody's old and on their deathbed, like, okay, that's one
That's
thing.
one
But
thing.
if
Yeah.
you've got a young, family member that dies in a car crash and you feel it happening, you wake up in the middle of
Yeah.
the night and go, oh my God, what happened to this
Yep.
person? Like that's
Yeah.
harder to explain. So like,
Yeah.
even just with some of
Y
the like stuff that goes on in space with
mm,
science, like when me and you went to school, a lot of the things that they told us was crazy back then are
is
now
now
like
true.
kind of proven to be true.
Yep.
Like I
Yep.
remember my grandmother told me a story about like when they were when she was in school, and they were kind of like doing geography, and they're like, well, it sure looks like Africa and South America kind of fit
Fit
together. And
together.
the teacher's like, no, that's dumb. It's just
My
a
gosh.
coincidence and blah, blah, blah. And now that's like one of the most,
That's yeah, proven
continental
things or
drift is
whatever.
one
Yeah.
of the most,
Yeah.
hard sciences that we have. So
Yeah.
I would imagine that like over time, we're going to learn more and more about this
Yeah.
stuff. And it
Well, just because you
seems,
can't explain it doesn't mean it's not true.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the thing. We just haven't figured it out yet. I was talking to my son the other day who's 14, and he's starting to talk about some of that fun stuff,
Mhm.
space and consciousness and the rest of it. And it's our nature to do that, I think. And I told him I had this weird idea that, dark energy or dark matter, this we have this big hole in our formulas that doesn't account for
Yeah.
all this stuff. And I said, I think that that piece is actually consciousness. He's
Yeah.
like, what?
I've had the same
I'm
thought.
like, I think that there's a whole bunch of stuff that we just can't see that's keeping this shit together. And it's literally, and I extrapolate that to say that physically we can't travel faster than light, but our consciousness doesn't weigh anything. There's no mass to it. So that probably can, go faster than light to someplace else. And is that what happened when we dream? I don't know. Is that what happened when we tie each other together and we can figure out that, something happened to Uncle Jeff or whatever it is? Maybe. But I think there's a lot of stuff that, your scientific instruments on your counter probably can't sense and maybe never will. Who knows?
Yeah.
But for sure I like that idea that just because you can't explain it doesn't mean it isn't true.
Yeah. And like
I
I
love
have an
that.
idea that like consciousness is like, I relate it to like a mycelial network of mushrooms,
Oh, love that. Yeah.
essentially. So like
Yeah.
you've got this massive network that you don't see in your backyard or, in the forest, like, that
Yep.
stretches out sometimes for miles. Like, I think the
Yep.
largest organism on Earth is
I think you're right.
a
I
network
think
of
you're right.
mushrooms. So, like,
Yeah.
we might just be the caps of the mushrooms or
Yeah.
even the spores of the
Yeah.
mushrooms,
You
right?
don't know.
Like,
Yeah.
if there's other universes out there, then, like, maybe the
Yeah.
universe is the cap and the
Yeah.
person, individual is the spore.
Yeah.
And
For
if
yeah. You
this
don't know.
network extends throughout the entire universe or the entire
Yeah.
galaxy or,
Yep. Whatever
throughout
it
the
is.
entire multiverse, then,
Yeah.
like, who's to say that you're not quantum entangled to every aspect of it? And, like,
Yeah.
you can travel faster than light because you're
Yeah.
connected to every part of the universe. And
Totally. You're just not
we're
going
just
like you
not
think you are.
capable of perceiving that at this point in
Right.
our evolution.
Right. Man, here we go. We went from Moonshine and Werewolves all the way to sci-fi. I
Yeah,
like it.
right.
I like it. I want to made the whole loop there. That's great. That's great.
Anything
So I'll make
else?
sure I send you, I was going to say, I'm going to make sure that I send you a link to make sure you can listen to the book while you're
Yeah,
riding
absolutely.
around or whatever. It'd be super
What
fun.
people can go. I'm sure they can go to your website.
Yep.
I'll put a link to the YouTube in it, and I'll put a link to your website so you can go and buy the
Yep.
physical
Buy
copy,
the book.
buy the
Sounds great.
listen to the YouTube. Even if you're not going to listen to it, go give them a good review.
Exactly.
If
Give me
you
a
like
little
the
love there. That'd
podcast,
be great.
give them a good
Yep.
review. Give them 5 stars and stuff like that helps. I
It
know it
does.
does because
It
when
does.
when I go on Audible to read a book, like, one of the first things I look at is the reviews. The first
Yep.
thing that I look at is who's reading the book. Like,
Mm.
because I have a couple of readers that I enjoy the most
Right. That
that
you
are
trust.
yeah, that are I think are the best at it. There's,
Right.
RC Bray and who's the other guy? I don't remember his name right now. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. But, there's a couple guys that I think are really good at it and I go
Right.
for that. And
Right.
did you do different voices for different characters and stuff
I
like that?
try. There's actually, it's funny you say that because I think it's chapter 5 or 6. I had written some of the werewolves are from different parts of the world. So I had written in my brain, I'm like, this is great. He'll be from here and he'll be
Yeah.
from Nigeria and he'll be from da, da,
Oh,
da.
yeah, yeah. And
And
then
then
you
when I started
stop.
reading it, I was like, I think I have to try to do this now. And
Yeah.
I actually have it might be on the YouTube as well, but I know in the audiobook, I actually have a little apology in the beginning of one of the chapters, like, look, it's just me. I'm trying my best. Like, okay, here we go. Because I'm trying to do a Nigerian accent and it's probably awful, but whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to do the accents. I try to change my voice a little bit because it just makes it more fun. It's more fun to read for sure. So it must be more fun to listen to. I
Yeah.
figured. Yeah.
One of the things I'm most excited about with artificial intelligence is
Hmm.
its capability to generate, videos and images and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And, like, I was just talking with my co-host yesterday. He's the founder of a company that's building our
Okay.
AI agents, and he was saying, like,
My gosh.
what if you used these engines to, like, you can take clips of the podcast and you use these engines to generate, like, video of what you're talking about and kind of
Yeah.
play it over your voice on the podcast. That's
Yeah.
interesting. It
Yeah.
takes forever right now, and it's a lot of work to, like,
Oh
get these
yeah.
clips out and stuff like that. But we're
Yep.
we're not far from it being a lot easier. And, like, I think one of the things that is going to be the coolest aspect of it is, like, there's so many books. I've read a ton of sci-fi books
Right.
since I gotten hurt, and very few, if any of them, have, like, made it to the big screen. Even the older
Right.
stuff, like, I'm a big Larry Niven fan, and Larry
Right.
Niven, hasn't really had anything make it to the big screen at
Yeah.
this point. And, like, how cool would it be for an author to be able to, upload their book and
Off it
you
goes.
could turn your book into, like, a 5 or 6 episode series. It's not going to be as good as something you see on Netflix, but
Right.
it's going to be
It's
good
something.
enough to, like, give the person who's invested in this story a way to see, like, the way that you see it. Like,
Yeah.
this is, oh, I thought this person looked like this, but it turns out they kind of look like that. Or,
Right. Yeah.
like, how would this setting look?
Yeah.
The house
I've
that they
toyed.
live in.
Yeah. I toyed with that for a second. It's a lot of work, like you said.
Yeah.
Even just finding like I'm sure you've seen on YouTube where they do those 360 videos
Mhm.
where you can just like you can sit in Paris,
Yep.
with like a head thing on and be like, holy moly, I'm in Paris. It looks like you're there. I thought of doing that for like each scene of the book to be paired the audiobook with like you just like if it's in the middle of the woods, you're literally sitting in the middle of the woods and you're listening as you're sitting there. And then the next scene happens in, one of the scenes in New York City, 1920. Like, how fun would that be to like just plop you down in New York City as this book is going in your ear and you just
Yeah.
sit there and look around and be like, oh my God, this is crazy. So it'd be kind of a way to immersive storytelling, essentially, immerse you even more.
Yeah.
So
And it
there's a
would
lot
it
of options there for sure. And it'll be interesting to see how books, movies, games, all those things, how they all start to converge because, part of the fun is making up your own story in your brain,
yeah.
and having the imagination. But then there is something to, you know, being in a place that provides a certain amount of input and imagination, seeds for better
Yeah,
imagination, I should
and
say.
just like that little bit can give you a primer to figure it out in your head a little bit better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like you said, you have that theater of the mind where you're generating this world on your own, but if somebody gives you a little bit of a primer, then
Hmm.
you're capable of doing it a little bit more, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And getting
Yeah.
it a little bit more finer detail and oh, this is what this person looks like within the
Hmm.
story. So I can put a face to the name and the dialogue and kind of imagine the face while I'm,
Yeah.
thinking like, I don't know.
Totally.
I think it'll be a really good thing for writers to be able
Yeah.
to not only like give the reader and the audience a visualization of the story that you created, but also it'll be easier for you to pitch your idea to some producer.
Oh
You
yeah.
know what?
Totally.
Hey, look, here's my book. This is, you can read it, and
Here's
here's
how it
this
looks.
6 episodes. I did 6 10-minute episodes or 15-minute
Right.
episodes, and this is what I think it should look like on the big
Yep.
screen. Clearly, you could do a better job than this thing
Right.
did, but like, here's the
Here's the
start of it.
here's the idea. Yeah. That's why a lot of comics get made into movies because you can
Yeah,
see it. It's right there.
yeah,
You just turn the pages and you could see
yep.
it. That's
That
why a
makes a
lot
lot
of
of
comics
sense.
tend to go that way because the visuals are already there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like a lot of especially in science fiction, like a lot of authors, like that guy I was talking about earlier,
Hmm.
Alistair Reynolds, he has a very expensive imagination. So, like, it's going to be very hard to put his books onto the big screen
Right.
because
Right.
of all of
Right.
these big space scenes that are going to require
Yeah.
like tons of CGI and like all of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's expensive to make,
Yep. It
like,
is. It is.
and as this stuff gets easier and easier to make, and the whole idea for movies was technology gets cheaper, it's easier to make them, they're going to be cheaper to,
Mm.
but it's actually gone in the other direction. Like
Yeah.
technology has gotten better, but they're getting more and more expensive to make, and less people are going to watch them
Yeah. Isn't it
every year.
funny?
So like
It's
they're going
crazy.
to have to figure out how to cut
Something.
costs at some point here in the near
Yep.
future. And there's a very major hole within Hollywood of good storytelling.
Yeah. There
I
is. They
feel
keep going
like,
back to old IP. Yeah.
yeah, they're going back to old IP, and then a lot of times, like, they have their bullshit stories that they want to tell, and then they couch it in some IP that like people are familiar with. Like,
Right.
there's these movies called A Quiet Place that,
Yeah.
like I watched the first and the second one and they're pretty
Hmm.
good, but
Right.
you don't really get a lot of background. You don't know what's going on for the most
Right.
part. Like they don't
You just jump in.
explain these monsters or aliens or whatever they
Yep.
are. And then they come out with a prequel where supposedly they're going to explain everything
Explain it
to
all.
you.
Right.
And you watch it and they don't explain anything. They show like
Like,
one
damn it.
scene where these things are like laying eggs or something like that. And
Right.
really, the movie was about some chick who's dying of cancer and wants to
Hmm.
reconnect with her dead father, and it's like,
Right.
can't we just have a monster movie without, like, this ridiculous story
Right.
that you had to tell? Like, just give me an alien invasion movie or monster
I'm
movie,
good
and
with it. I'm good
yeah.
with it.
Anyways. Alright. Well,
All right.
I'll have
Thanks for
your
making time today. I really appreciate it.
no problem, man. I hope we sell you some books, and, I'll have
Yep.
everything down in the description, so go
All
show
right.
Max some love. It's
All right.
been a
Thanks
pleasure
so much, Nick. I
talking with you.
appreciate it.
All right.
I appreciate it. Have a
See
good
ya.
one. Bye.